What we are looking at now is, I think, going to the root of what we can encounter in the first time of history, economic, social, political, cultural, whatever it is. And we are going back to one of the key moments of what we can call, together with China's official lingo, reform and opening. So we are going back to not only, I think, a key turning point in China's history, but if I understand correctly, then also the opening chapter of your book. So with that, I would like to hand over to John, and we are really excited about your presentation.
Thank you, Gabor. Always a pleasure to be able to support the RAS. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thoughts I'm going to share with you this evening are about 1978, a year of enormous significance. Somebody pointed out in a chat room earlier that sounds suspiciously like the book title 1587, A Year of No Significance. That's not by accident. It is true that 1978, A Year of Enormous Significance, is the first section of my project. And I'll share a bit more about that with you in a minute, but the overall project is called First Time in History, and let's have a look at why. So this is my suggestion that you may be skeptical about the idea that there is in fact a first time in history phenomenon. So let me see if I can try to prove it to you. This is a scatter plot of GDP per capita 1950 and 2016. This is measured in PPP, and it's purchasing power parity. And if you can see on the, I think that's the left scale. Where are my glasses here? Left scale, the y-axis is 2016. The x-axis is 1950. So the way this graph works is the farther away you are from that zero line, the more your economy has grown over the course of these 70 years. So you can see that India is there.
The farther above, if we are correct, right?
Huh?
The farther above. I mean, if you're below the line and you're far away. Then...
The farther to the up and left.
Mm.
So the closer you are to the northwest corner, the top left corner, the greater the growth. India, you can see there's a line at about 4, that's the world average. And India at that blue arrow is slightly below that over the course of these 70 years. Here are Brazil and Indonesia. They have grown at about 8 times their 1950 level over the course of these 70 years. And I think you can see where I'm going with this. There's China. China has grown at about a 15 times pace over the course of these 70 years. And if we extended that out to 2000 over time compared to the other 3 large population developing economies, would be even greater. China's at about 21 now. Here's another way to look at it. These lines represent the growth of the various countries. I've used developing economy at the top for a baseline, a developed economy at the top for a baseline. And you can see that Brazil and Indonesia and India are in there. India is the line at the bottom. What you should be able to see is that there's one slope there that's steeper than the others. A steeper slope means faster economic growth, and that steeper slope is China. So I think these two graphics should indicate that on a gross domestic product basis, that China's growth has been exceptional over the course of this time. Now, there's a couple of other things to think about, because I'm not just making a claim about back to 1950, I'm making a claim back to when we were wandering around in the Serengeti as hunter-gatherers, that China's growth is unprecedented in human history in terms of scale and scope. So one thing to keep in mind is there was no rapid per capita GDP growth before the Industrial Revolution. Didn't exist. GDP growth before the Industrial Revolution was basically how much grain an individual farmer could produce, or how much wheat, or how much potatoes. Rapid economic growth only started happening with the dawn of the Industrial Revolution about 230, 240 years ago. China and India were relatively flat from the mid-18th, the mid-20th century. Historically, large population countries did better in GDP aggregate because they had more people. It's natural, more farmers. Great Britain, of course, had a great deal of GDP growth, starting with the Industrial Revolution, one of the leading countries in the Industrial Revolution. But their growth over 200 years was only about 5 times. And Europe was less. Those of you here in the audience who know European history, I'm sure that Gabor knows this, will remember that Europe was somewhat otherwise occupied in the years between, say, 1700 and 2000, mostly with killing each other. And the United States, which of course was a great growth story of the late 19th and early 20th century, grew about 5 times over 100 years. But China grew much more than that in a much shorter period of time, with a population base that is 5 to 10 times the size, to 20 times the size of those other economies. So I hope that I have convinced you to not have this expression, but to have this expression when I claim that what's happened in China is the first time in history phenomenon. So with that as a base, let me turn to 1978. 1978 is a benchmark year, not just for me. A lot of people have recognized this over the course of many years, in large part because that was the year that Deng Xiaoping and the Third Plenum announced reform and opening up. They announced the end of class struggle as the paradigm and economic development as the new paradigm. That all happened in December 1978. Well, around that time, the official communique was in December. And that's why a lot of people mark 1978 as the year that reform and opening started and the year that China's astonishing growth began.